Peter. Thanks
Hi, Anna.
for joining me. Could you give us a bit of a high-level overview as to who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Peter Latzelsperger. I'm right now the managing director of UNIHA Water Technologies, and I am from Austria, from Upper Austria to be specific. I am actually with UNIHA since 3.5 years. Before that, I was with a big Austrian healthcare providing company, and actually I was in charge of South America and the Caribbean. So I actually just returned back to Austria some years ago.
Nice. And it's quite a big change going from healthcare into clean water and water treatment. Why did you want to make the change?
I would say actually the change is, at least in what I do, the change is not so much related to what you're doing, because basically both of it is international projects. It has to do with a plant as such. In my now case, it's water treatment plants, but also a hospital can be considered a plant. For me, the change was actually driven by, on the one hand, to be honest, by specifically Corona and also the type of changes it had on everybody's life, especially in struggling economies like in South America.
Yeah.
And the change specifically towards UNIHA basically was driven by two factors. One of which is that I wanted to stay in an industry that basically contributes something to society. So I would like to, sell assault rifles. And the other thing is that I wanted to actually change for an SME company from a big corporation, at that time 35,000 people roughly, or 30,000 people, to a small SME with under 50 people.
Yeah, it must be quite a transition going from such a big company to an SME. And we already spoke briefly, and we wanted to talk about humanity in leadership. Why is that an interesting topic for us to talk about today?
Truly, actually, my conviction is that, and that's also driven by my own personal experience, logically, that the most important things about management, leadership, collaboration, however you want to call it, is actually things that machines can't take over. So at the moment, there's a lot of buzzwords in relation to artificial intelligence and everything that it can do for us. On the other hand, I truly think we are a bit losing the focus on natural intelligence, so to say, and emotional intelligence. If I may say, you can imagine when I was put into a leadership position, I was 25, right? So specifically very young for this kind of position, which I'm very grateful for. But at the same time, it was a huge challenge. Not only in terms of, let's say, the responsibilities and the tasks, but also in the interpersonal sphere, it was a huge challenge. I had some employees or co-workers who were twice my age, and I had to be their supervisor, their boss, however you want to call it, line manager.
Yeah.
So let's say by force, I had to consider how to best manage people and how to best organize myself with the team that is at hand.
Yeah. And I guess, I don't know if this is a term familiar to you, but when you're so young and you're put in what was quite a high power position, you are faced with something of imposter syndrome. Did you come up against that? How did you deal with that?
Yes, I did. I mean, the imposter syndrome, maybe it's a bit exaggerated to say that I had an imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
But of course, I mean, even today, there are many situations where visibly I'm very calm and I'm like, we have to analyze this. And my inner self is like, oh my God, I have never heard these words, you know? And actually, that's exactly what I mean. It doesn't make sense to neglect or to not admit that some things are not known to you, or that sometimes you don't know what to do. In my personal experience, the results are 100 times better if you show your true colors, right? That doesn't mean that you shall panic in front of other people. But I think it's very motivating to also have, for instance, more experienced colleagues that you can approach with something like, I think those are the problems that we're facing at this very point. And specifically, I know you're very experienced in this and that. Please help me to get out the bad result, right?
Yeah. And that's kind of almost the definition of a company is a collection of people. So
Yeah.
having that diversity of thought, you hire them for a reason. And I guess that's also something you touched upon is that a big mistake you see leaders making in SMEs is getting really caught up in the day-to-day of business. So how are you balancing understanding what's happening in the grounds of your business and with the people you manage whilst maintaining this more holistic approach and being able to make more collaborative decisions?
I mean, on the one hand, I have to say that, first of all, I'm very lucky with the team that we have in UNIHA. And I'm not just saying this as a cheesy marketing sentence.
They're watching
Truly,
this,
we are
that's
lucky.
why.
But also, like we're very dependent on the quality of people, not only in terms of formation, education, but also personality-wise that we have in our company. Remember that UNIHA is actually not a manufacturer, so we don't have the secret Coca-Cola formula or anything like that, right? I also highly doubt that it even exists in our industry. The only thing we're actually having is teams, people, right? As to your question, there is a danger, of course, to get caught up in the everyday details because in an SME, you need to actually know about those. On the other hand, what we can see or what I can see is two things that are really helping me. One is structure. So, for instance, a sure fix, which is when I actually deep dive into details, but in a very limited time frame, right? And then throughout the day, I won't check if someone, whatever, read my email. On the other hand, as you say, it is a kind of struggle to maintain the balance between, let's say, strategic and collaborative approach, but also being on top of things. So the dogma, if I may say that, it's a big word, but let's say the rule that I have is that praise always goes down and critique and responsibility always goes up. So my wish is actually that every one of my employees and my coworkers and colleagues knows that when, I hope I'm allowed to say that in LinkedIn, when shit hits the fan, then actually there are people, namely me, who will have to sort it out and who will try to help. But then if something goes actually well, we will not take the praise for good decisions that we didn't make, right? And that's a very motivating, let's say, basic rule, I would say.
Yeah. And it's interesting. So you want to be able to do those deep dives, but then you still need to have trust in your employees that you've hired the right people, that they know what to do and that they will do it. And I think probably a big part of that comes in hiring. When you've got a team of 35 to 40 people, each person that you add could have quite a substantial impact on the company culture. What do you look for when you're talking to people to join your team, permanent members of your team, not only on the hard skills side, right? They have to be able to do the job, but is there certain personality types that you know are going to be a good match?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, the impact that every single one has in our company is relatively a lot bigger than in a huge corporation. I mean, that's clear, right? Like I'm not sitting on the project manager's shoulder when he's with the client in wherever, Cameroon, right? So I can't actually control what is being agreed on. In the end, as you say, hiring is a big, let's say, filter or funnel for us to get the right people. I wouldn't say that there is a magic formula to always catch the right people. So obviously, we also have fluctuation in our team, although it's very low. But as soon as the hard skill side is, let's say, complete, so we know that someone can do the job, then My approach is, first of all, I never interview people alone, and I don't make these
Mm.
decisions, or I don't take these decisions alone.
Yeah.
And secondly, I think you have a certain feeling if it's a small company, if you are collaborating very closely, you get to know the people. Remember, I mean, I'm spending more time with my colleagues than I'm spending with my parents or my siblings
Mm.
or partners or whatever, right? So logically, I get to know the persons also
Mm.
behind the function. And I
Yeah.
think our assessment, if someone is fitting the team personality-wise, soft skill-wise, is more or less sharp.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah,
sometimes it is something of a gut feeling in how
yeah,
you're getting on with someone. And I like that. I think having that decision made by two people, kind of,
yeah,
or two or three people, letting them meet the team, it's something I always advise clients to do, because then both sides are getting a feeling of, okay, are we going to get on? Is this going to work? And you're right, you are spending most of your time actually with your colleagues. They almost do become sort of a
yeah,
second family. So helps when you get on and helps when you like each other. How do you
yeah.
go about building a company culture? How important do you see that in business?
I think it's extremely important, but I
Mm.
think actually that it's not something that you can do as a standalone task,
No.
basically. It's like in your private life, you can't sit at home and think, okay, tomorrow I'll start to be charismatic.
Yeah.
It's it's really hard to do that like deliberately, right?
Yeah.
I think company culture is basically built by trust, and trust is built by honesty and transparency.
Mm.
So, because you said they are nearly becoming a second family, I would agree to that in a time-related sense.
Yeah.
But honestly, if someone tells me in our company we are like a big family, that's a
So
big, big,
cheesy.
big, yeah, no, it's an alarm light for me because of course there is a difference, and it's
Yeah.
also not honest to say my coworkers are part of my family. They are not. They
No.
also don't have to be. In our case, what I would say is we are truly, first of all, we try to communicate transparently and
Mm.
honestly, right? There is no politics involved in our company.
Yeah.
Whatever I am convinced of, I am not ashamed to tell someone.
Yeah.
Maybe the timing in order to involve people at the right time is a thing or is a question, but I will never lie to anyone, right?
Mm.
The second thing is that also the appreciation that we have for our employees is not a marketing tool. It's
Mm.
actually a heartfelt emotion, which maybe in the day to day is not visible explicitly, but you know, whenever push comes to shove, you can actually see how the real relations between people are. So we've, unfortunately or sadly, we have had some situations in the last years where we had really difficult moments for some of our employees. And
Yeah.
those are also the moments where, as a company, you need to remind yourself that how much you value the person that is working with you, right?
Yeah.
That's the one thing. And the other thing is that what I feel that people appreciate most in our team is actually the fact that we only do things that make sense because we actually
Mm.
can't afford to do things that don't make sense, right?
Yeah.
I can remember when I started my first job, I did a gazillion of presentations, knowingly that those would end up in the waste paper basket as soon as I did them. But I still had to do them. And that's something that we don't do here.
Oh, you froze for a second. You hear
Oh,
me?
sorry.
It's all right. So you don't make people do tasks that they don't see the purpose behind, I think is what you were saying.
Exactly. And
Mm.
also, you know, when we are approaching a problem, my approach or our approach as a company is not to break down the problems in super small work tasks and then
Yeah.
distribute those within the team. I do think that for each task or for each, let's say, problem or however you want to call it, um, you need one person that is responsible
Mm.
as a sort of, let's say, task force leader, if you may say. And you have to let people have responsibility for their actions and also for the topics that they are in charge of.
Yeah. And I think that must help with you. You said you have quite long tenure and not a huge overturn of staff. And I think putting people in charge of whole projects is surely going to make them see a lot of pride in that and take a lot of pride in the success of the business that you wouldn't if you didn't know what you were doing was contributing towards.
Absolutely. And if you see, I mean, that's not something that me as a person or we as a, let's say, management of the company uh, um, have implemented. But of course, the nature of our projects, and actually that also applies to hospitals, but in
Yeah.
water treatment plants, it's more visible even immediately. The nature of our projects gives you a huge amount of satisfaction. The first time you are actually opening a water treatment plant and people for the first time in their life have potable
Yeah.
water, that's a great moment and that's a grand feeling. And actually, this is a motivation for me, at least. That's a
Yeah.
motivation to go on, even if things are difficult. And that's not something that you only see in emerging markets or in development countries. That's also something that you see in Eastern Europe. We are now commissioning a plant in the Balkanic region.
Yeah.
And people are grateful, they for the first time in their life, they open the tap and they have drinking water.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
think I
just,
saw you do a LinkedIn post about
yeah,
that in Serbia with just a glass of water, and it's something that every single person can understand the importance of
yeah,
that glass of water. And also just a reality check how much you take it for granted that you turn the tap on and you can drink what comes out of it. A lot of places still don't have this luxury.
absolutely. I mean, honestly speaking, when I was living in South America and I didn't have
Mm,
anything to do with water treatment or purification,
yeah.
one of the basic things that I missed most, aside of my family, of course, was that I could drink the tap water. It's
Yeah.
something so basic in our region, and it's something that actually you don't ever think about, right?
Yeah.
And that's why it's a great moment to provide this basic possibility and take this sorrow and this preoccupation off people's chest.
Yeah. That must be really rewarding moment for you
It
and
is.
everyone who's been part of that project. Yeah, it's really cool. And I always like to finish with something like this. What's one piece of advice that you were given early in your career or more recently that you would like to share with future generations of project managers, business leaders?
Yeah. Um, I mean, I don't have a quote, if that's what
You
you're
don't have anything
asking.
catchy?
No, I don't. I didn't prepare that, honestly. I don't plan to be a celebrity one day, so there's no quote. But what I could really actually learn from my first boss, and she is, I think, one of the smartest persons that I have ever met in my life,
Wow.
is that being talented and being smart, which at least she assessed that I was at that time, is only half of what you need. So, in terms of imposter syndrome, because you mentioned that earlier, I was getting a bit head in the clouds, at a certain
Mm,
point, and she brought me a bit back to reality. So she told me being smart and being agile is one thing, but you also need to work for it, right? It's you need to
yeah.
put your best and your back into it every single day, and that's what I'm trying.
Other half is discipline, hard work, and time in the game, I guess.
Yeah.
Cool. Super. Thanks so much, Peter. It was really great to talk to you.
Thank you very much. It's always nice talking to you.
Thank you.